that she misled the American people over and over and over again while under federal investigation.
When do we beat Mexico at the border? They're laughing at us, at our stupidity. And now they're beating us economically. They are not our friend.
In the absence of the truth, bullcrap prevails. So here come the truth, jokers. Look at what's been going on. All the people are coming out, the dang Walking Dead. You know, the people who don't pay attention to politics until the election cycle comes around. And they get so emotional. They get all into it, and, you know, they pick their sides and they fight against each other. But in reality, they ain't getting nowhere with it. So you're falling for the little racist angle. You're fighting each other. You're ripping up the signs. And, oh yeah, let me go to this. This is something here. How is it that this little fake joker right here comes out and endorses Donald Trump? Now, elections are all about perception. So when you see this guy endorsing Donald Trump, you will say, oh, well, Donald Trump is a racist because he's endorsing Donald Trump. But here's the thing. What is KKK? Well, the KKK was created by the Democrats. The KKK still belongs to the Democrats. So this guy right here knows that if he comes out and throws his support behind Donald Trump, it's going to get the reaction of this. That's the only reason why he's coming out and doing that. Lyndon B. Johnson did the same thing in the 1964 election. He made an ad saying that Barry Goldwater was endorsed by the KKK. But how is he going to say that when the KKK is a democratic entity? They are the prop, and I'm talking about the KKK. The Democrats are the most racist party in history, the only party in American history to kill black people because they wanted them to vote Democrat. Lyndon B. Johnson said, I'll have those N-words voting Democrat for the next 200 years. When he was talking about N-words, he was talking about black people. And black people, they still vote Democrat.
Today, our country has lost a true American original, my friend and mentor, Robert C. Byrd. Senator Byrd was a man of surpassing eloquence and nobility.
There are white. I've seen a lot of white in my time.
I admired his tireless advocacy for his West Virginia constituents, his fierce defense of the Constitution and the traditions of the Senate, and his passion for a government that improves the lives of the people it serves.
There are white. I've seen a lot of white in my time.
They mentioned that he once had a fleeting association with a Ku Klux Klan. And what does that mean? I'll tell you what it means. He was a country boy from the hills and hollows of West Virginia. He was trying to get elected.
As Secretary of State, I continued to rely on his advice and counsel. Robert C. Byrd led by the power of his example, and he made all of us who had the honor of serving as his colleagues better public servants and better citizens. Robert C. Byrd left such a legacy.
Okay, Now let's get to the Democratic brand, because that's really what this book and the movie are about. It's called Hillary's America. And by the way, the picture that you have of here, she looks very Emperor Palpatine from Star Wars. Was that intentional? She always wears those outfits that make her look like Emperor Palpatine.
My take on her was that she looks very Evita-ish. Remember the Evita?
Yeah, there's a picture in the book, yeah.
Yeah, there's a picture of Evita, and, you know, the Evita, the Perón Foundation, the Clinton Foundation, this sort of notion of reigning imperial over a country, third worldizing it a little bit. You know, here's a good kickoff point for this whole thing, because Reagan once said, I didn't leave the Democratic Party, it left me. And the hidden implication of that is, or not so hidden, the Democrats have been good guys. It's only recently, let's say with the 60s or McGovern, that they went off the tracks. So I'm actually, with this book and this movie, Hillary's America, I'm sort of breaking with Reagan. I'm saying, you know what? No. There actually is a very sordid history in the Democratic Party that goes back 150 years. These were never really the good guys. They sounded like the good guys, and they always understood the importance of justifying very bad things by appealing to something noble. Even during slavery, they tried to do that. But if you strip away that kind of veneer, you realize that there's a lot of bad stuff going on. And so that is laid out rather uncompromisingly in the book and the movie.
Yeah, so I want to get into some of that. You know, it's funny because a lot of people say to me, I say I'm a liberal, and they say, well, we see you shifting to libertarianism. And I've realized over the last year or so that most of my liberal positions, whether on gay marriage or marijuana or whatever else, I can rationalize through a libertarian lens. You know what I mean? It's the same rationalization, which is why classic liberal and libertarian are kind of the same. But I did see, which is what you just quoted Reagan on, I've seen the progressives leave me. My views are the same. They're the ones that went that far with free speech and all this stuff. And it's like, I'm trying to pull you guys back, but not much more I can do.
Yeah, the progressives, I think, you know, when we look back at the 60s and the free speech movement and the Berkeley Barb and all that kind of stuff, it turns out that that free speech slogan was somewhat tactical. Because it's one thing to say, I believe in free speech, and so you better give me my free speech. And frankly, if our places were exchanged, I would give you your free speech.
Right.
As opposed to, you give me my free speech because I'm on the outside. But if I were on the inside, I'd be doing exactly what you're doing and block you from having a say.
Yeah.
And so that's where there's a parting of the ways, and the libertarians come onto one camp, the true liberals, the classical liberals.
Yeah.
And you may say the progressives and the leftists fall into a different camp.
So basically, when you're talking about the inside and the outside, you're saying, because they're using the suppression Olympics thing, right? So that if you are black or Muslim or whatever, wherever they're putting you in all of these things, and as you said before, as Indian, you're sort of off the chart because your community has done really well in America. But I think you would also argue that there are truly systemic reasons funneled through the Democrats that have left Black America behind. And
yeah,
that's what a lot of
we're having this big debate about Dallas, and you know, interestingly, the debate is sort of between the people who say it's the gun or it's the cops, and on the other side, the people who say let's look at the ideology of the shooter, let's look at his motives, he was a radical Muslim, and so on. Now, I step back from this whole debate and I go, look, why is this stuff occurring all over the place and all the time? And I think the reason is if you apply the liberal principle, what is the root cause of it? Well, the root cause of it is that we've actually allowed places to develop in America that are very uninhabitable. You can almost say that it would cause PTSD to live in these places. I mean, just imagine you walk around Oakland or inner city Baltimore, Detroit, Chicago, even Dallas. Yeah. These places are horrible. I mean, I grew up alongside very poor, I was middle class, but poor people in India. But those people are not, they're poor, but if you gave them opportunity, they'd be fine.
Yeah.
That's because their families are intact and they know the value of hard work. There just aren't jobs and opportunity for them, but they're fully prepared to take advantage of it. On the other hand, we have created places in America where there's not only no jobs, but there's no education, there's no family structure to incubate the kind of values that enable you to be a successful citizen. It's very unsafe and dangerous. So how do you grow up normal in places places like that, you don't. So this is what I call the urban plantation. And this is going to be one of the controversial ideas in the book, because in the past, some people make facile analogies between slavery and what's going on now. I basically make the same analogy, but not in a facile way. I actually say that if you look at the slave plantation, ramshackled home, and no family structure because people are being bought and sold, and it's dangerous and it's risk, and there's incredible punishments for falling out of line. But there is health care, because if the kid gets sick, they call the doctor, and there is a lifelong Social Security because the slaves are provided for life. It's not all that different from there to the urban plantations, with the only difference that the people in the urban plantations keep voting for it.
Okay, so definitely I can see why some people would say this is an inflammatory thing to say, because basically you're pretty much saying that the Democratic Party has sort of given Black America just enough to control it, sort of, right? And at the same time, that just enough is exactly what is oppressing it. And then at the same time, they vote 90% for Democrats. I mean, there's a lot. So it's sort of, I guess using the word plantation is intentionally inflammatory on your part, but I see what you're doing there.
Right, and the reason the analogy works is that if you think about slavery, now you own the slave. You don't actually have to feed him at all. The slave is sort of like your car. But then you realize, wait a minute, if my car is going to work, I need to look after my car. I need to actually at least minimally make my car function. And so what happened with the slaves is that you had to give the slaves a minimum subsistence living, right? Now look, I'm not stupid enough to say that we have plantation owners running around in quite the same way, but here's what I'm saying, that we have spent over now 50 years trillions of dollars on people who, if their problem was just poverty, we could easily have gotten them out of poverty. Just take this amount of money and divide it by the number of people, and a very big number appears, right? So how is it that after a half century of trying, you still have these places be pretty much the same as they were 50 years ago? That's kind of a very telling fact.
Right, and I guess the real inherent problem is that if you give people a certain something, even if your intentions are good. So let's pretend everything you said, or not pretend, let's go with saying everything you said is totally right. But let's say the Democrat or certain Democrats' intentions are good, not that they're trying to do this. That still you create a situation where if you're giving someone just enough to survive, you're basically creating a situation where for them to even go out and get better work or whatever it is, they're not incentivized to do it because they'd have to work that much harder to just have enough, just have a tiny bit more than you're giving them. So it really becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Absolutely. And I don't deny that there are rank and file Democrats whose intentions are good, and there are even people who voted for these programs whose intentions are good. But it should also be said that, you know, there is FDR saying to fellow politicians, look, if I devise my Social Security program this way, no politician can ever undo it. In other words, if I make the current generation of workers pay for the current, you know, I could have set this program up a different way. You have a Social Security account that the federal government maintains, but it's your money, and it's your contributions go into that account, and they earn interest. And when you retire, you draw on your account. It could have been drafted up that way, but they decided let's not do that, because then if later people decide they don't want it, then they'll just stop the program, and there we go. So they designed it so it was hard to stop. Johnson, too, very cynical. Remember, Johnson came out of the sort of Dixiecrat wing of the Southern Democratic Party, very rough guy, and the idea that he sort of suddenly just became a convert to the cause of civil rights is ridiculous. I mean, that's just not a view of human nature that works.
Right. Do you think there's a danger when we look back on some of the history, and when I was reading the book, you know, when you talk about any of these people from 150 years ago to 50 years ago, that you lose a little bit of perspective on what it was like to live at that time? I mean this in general. Like I went to Thomas Jefferson's home in Monticello maybe a year or so ago, and I thought they did a really great job talking about how he had slaves, but also was fighting to free slaves. But I think that we have a way about us now where we automatically look at somebody and we completely forget the context in which they lived and what things were like at that time, and we want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, like schools that are taking down names of people that, you know, were important cultural figures a year ago or something like that, that we forget that history shapes us.
I think this is a very important point, both for foreign policy and for history, because when we're dealing with other countries is similar in that there's a culture there and there's a whole ecosystem there. And if you have no idea what it is, you're not going to be able to manage it or deal with it in a very sensible way.
Yeah.
The founders, the founders get together in Philadelphia. Now, they represent 13 states. Slavery is legal in every one of those 13 states, not just in the southern ones, in all of them.
Yeah.
Now they're deciding whether to make a union. Now, the people say, well, the founders should have outlawed slavery. Well, the founders outlawed slavery, all the 13 guys would have gotten up and gone home.
Right.
or at the very least, a whole bunch of them would have. You could not have gotten all those guys to stay in a union that did that. So the point being that we're now insisting that the founders follow an option that was not in practice available to any of them.
Yeah.
They were choosing, okay, either we have slavery, allow it for now, and build an anti-slavery country that will eventually abolish slavery, or we don't have a country. Choose. Those are our actual options. We don't have some third option of having an anti-slavery country and getting everyone to join right now.
Right, sort of taking an imaginary moral position as if it could be done tomorrow like that. And it also shows the failings of all of us as humans, which I think everyone forgets. Because when I was at Monticello, when I took the tour, I thought they did a really nice job of saying, he was writing all of this stuff and made his life about freeing slaves and giving the underpinnings of some of this. And at the same time, we know that he was having sex with a couple of his slaves, I think at least, and had a child with one of them. I would think by standard definitions of 2016, he would probably be considered a rapist. I mean, if he, because he owned this woman and was having sex with her. We don't know if it was voluntary. So I think that sort of moralizing different errors is just really dangerous.
I think it is for us almost unimaginable to put us into those plantations and imagine what life was like, and whether, for example, Sally Hemings, the woman with Jefferson, is it possible that normal human affections could have operated in that context? Now, traditional feminist theory would say never.
Would say never.
Just because this man has such supreme power over her, that the idea that she could in any sense have loved him. But then these same feminists who say all this and write all these complex books about it, when it comes to Bill Clinton, and then suddenly they go, so this is where there's a certain kind of feminism loses moral credibility.
Yeah.
Because suddenly it's okay when Bill Clinton did it, because we kind of need the Clintons to carry out our agenda. And essentially what Bill is basically saying is, I can do whatever I want as long as I take the correct positions on women's rights.
Right. And so that's an interesting segue to something else that you talk about in the book, that basically you argue that Hillary and Bill, this was sort of a marriage made in Mordor or something.
Marriage made in hell.
Marriage
totally.
made in hell. I was trying to find something a little more creative, because basically she knew that he sort of had these sexual proclivities and all this stuff, and that she could sort of use him in a way to ultimately get what she wants, which is the title of your book.
They're both very ambitious, and I think the difference is that Bill has the natural talent politically. He's likable, he's gregarious, he can talk you out of anything. And he has that kind of sincere look that he gives even when he's pathologically lying.
Right.
Now, Hillary is also a pathological liar, but she can't pull it off. And so I think Hillary realized early on that if I'm going to make my way politically, I actually need this guy, and I need him to be attached to me. And I actually need to figure out a way that he can never actually get away from me, because he's my pitch man. He's going to sell my product. And she realized that, this guy's basically a sex addict. He knows it. I know it. And the only question is, how can that now become the basis for a very peculiar type of marriage? And I think that the reason it did is basically Hillary says to Bill, okay, Bill, listen, I will become the manager of your sex addiction. Yeah. I'll make sure it doesn't kill you politically. Because the truth is, Bill's in Arkansas. I mean, mores have liberalized and so on, but this kind of pathological behavior doesn't fly in Arkansas. So Hillary had to manage Bill from day one. And if you read the Clinton biographies, it's obvious that Bill's campaign managers would give full lists to Hillary of all the women and so on. So Hillary knew about this from Arkansas days. And yet, every time it happened, she had to feign shock and go through this ritual of, I'm not speaking to Bill. Here's Chelsea and I walking on one side of the beach, and Bill is all by himself. He's in the doghouse. And the media plays along with this big little charade and the reconciliation. You know, it's all comical and it's all pathetic.
Right.
I can't believe we're considering the possibility of going through it again.
Right. So basically you're saying while she was saying this is a vast right-wing conspiracy, was basically engineering the conspiracy. It just wasn't a right-wing conspiracy.
It wasn't a right-wing conspiracy at all. In fact, I mean, what? Juanita Broaddrick, Kathleen Will. I mean, these aren't right-wing. Paula Jones. I mean, so no, these are people who have just come out one after the other. So I think a lot of people think Bill's the bad guy and Hillary is like a plantation wife, you know, has been suffering while the master has been making good with all the slaves when the mulatto is running on the plantation. But I think in this case, it's not that. Hillary is not the enduring, suffering wife. I think with Hillary and Bill, it's sort of wink, wink. They both know what's going on, and they've played a kind of a diabolical game with this.
So how do we as a nation extricate ourselves from this political mess? Let's say everything you've laid out about, you know, the history of the Democrats, which now leads us to Hillary, is right. Let's say, I can tell you're not fully sold on Trump. I think that, right? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it's fair to say.
You don't strike me as fully sold. So I think most people are not happy about either one of these. I mean, I even see on Twitter the people that all day long are telling me how wonderful Trump is. There's definitely an element of, yeah, we don't know what his policies are. We just like that he's wrangling the system. And I understand that. And I think all the Bernie people that are now very disappointed that he's supporting Hillary, I understand that. How do we extricate ourselves from this crazy system? I had Gary Johnson on here, who's running as a libertarian, and I got to sit with him just like this and look him in the eye, and I thought, this is a good man. This is a good, decent man. And I don't agree with him on everything, but at the very least, we need a third party, right? At the very, very least.
Well, we haven't had a third. We haven't been able to create a three-party system. The Europeans have political structures that allow for multiple parties. Right now, a third party would either harm one side or the other side. So right now, if you had a third party, a libertarian party, it would hurt Trump. But
do you think that's for sure? Because I don't know which way he'd pull from at this point. I think people are so frustrated with both of them that I think it would be I know traditionally that's what people would think. He's going to pull more from the Republicans. I think what's more likely
to happen is that if the Republicans take a terrible beating in November and let's say lose 40 states, which is which would be a rout, then you're more likely to see the remaking of the Republican Party. The Republican Party would then undergo this kind of a severe internal convulsion. Probably a lot of its leaders would be thrown out, and the Republican Party would have to say, are we a Libertarian Party? Are we a social conservative party? What are the elements that define us? It's kind of the crisis that the Whig Party went through in the middle of the 19th century. And essentially the Whig Party collapsed and you got the Republican Party, but not a three-party system. The Republican Party replaced the Whig Party and became the main opposition party to the Democrats.
Yeah. So all that being said, I mean, how do we do it? How do you actually get another party? And I get what you're saying, that maybe we just need to replace one of these parties. But I would argue it seems to me that our political debate really is about this wide, and we're constantly debating it like this. There's a reason that Wall Street gives like 51% to the Republicans and 49% to the Democrats, and that switches half the time. That we need something like this, and it's not about just replacing these parties, it's about getting a whole new set of ideas in there.
Yeah, it totally is. You know, one thing I miss is when I was, when I was in my teens and early 20s, I looked up to people like Irving Kristol and Judge Bork and Jeane Kirkpatrick, Solzhenitsyn, Hayek, Milton Friedman. So these luminaries now, that helped to define the debate then, are no longer on the horizon. But what's troubling is I don't see replacements for them. It was also the case when I was at AEI, the American Enterprise Institute. We would have conferences with the Brookings Institution, which was our counterpart on the left. And there was a lot of common ground. In other words, the Brookings guys would say, you should spend more money on schools. And the conservatives would say, all right, we'd consider doing that if you'd consider imposing more rigorous academic standards. So you could have something called additive compromise, which is not that we take you and me and go in the middle, but we do what you want to do and what I want to do, and we compromise by achieving both. And so that kind of common ground has become extremely rare. By and large, if Obama does something, the Republicans' job is to block him. And I think part of the reason for that is the belief that what Obama wants is actually fundamentally not where we want America to go. It's not the case of two people who agree on a goal and are only disagreeing about means. It's like one guy wants to go to Chicago and the other guy wants to go to Maine.
Right. So you don't want to end up in...
So why would you possibly board his bus?
Right. So I guess in that regard, you would probably agree with Marco Rubio in a certain way that his one mantra kept being about that Obama fundamentally wants to alter this country. And that's what your previous movie was about.
I'm pretty sure he got it from me.
Yeah.
I mean, that was my mantra.
Did he take it from you? I mean, he kept repeating it like a robot, even though they kept trying to get him to say something else, and he seemed unable to get off that switch. But people didn't really hear that message.
No. And I think it was the wrong time and place. I mean, look, Obama's basically run through his course. This is an argument that's not intuitive, because we always assume that our presidents, we elect them to do the best for the country. We assume that they mean well. And I think Obama means well in the sense that, unlike Hillary, Obama's he's not president to make money. He's not trying to enrich himself. He has ideological goals. Now, I think the ideological goals are bad, but they're still held sincerely. And it takes some argumentation. I mean, I wrote 2 books on Obama. I made a movie about him just to sell that argument even to conservatives who are a little bit shaken by it. The idea he's anti-colonialist and motivated by the dreams of his father. So Rubio was sort of like touching on all that, but without even attempting to clarify or elaborate.